Good afternoon, and welcome to It's No Secret in memory of Tyler Matthews, live from Aired Out Podcast, located right here on North Main Street in Barrie, directly across the street from Nelson Ace Hardware. Today we have with us the executive director of the Central Vermont Turning Point, or Turning Point of Central Vermont, Robert Purvis. Super excited to have you, and honored to have you on our third show. And the Turning Point Center in Central Vermont, that's a huge box to unpack. You guys do a whole lot of stuff down there. So welcome, and hopefully we can unpack that box today.
Thank you. And I'd like to mention Tyler, who was the son of one of our recovery coaches.
Yes.
Who works in the emergency department, and thankfully she's back to work now, but it was certainly traumatic, and she was a member of our family, and we do our best to support members of our family, and we all knew Tyler somewhat, at least, and it's just part of the ongoing tragedy that we're all experiencing. But Mariah the mother is especially strong, and we knew that when we hired her. She's a very strong lady, and so she's determined to help make this experience part of what she brings to her work, which is supporting individuals and families who are struggling with substance use disorder.
And I have no doubt that she will do that for many years to come.
I certainly hope so.
Yeah, we're lucky to have her.
She's very good.
Yeah. Very lucky to have her. Now, so you say that she's in the emergency department. Is that part of the program at Turning Point Center, where you just try to get people to services from the ER?
Well, we started our program there 5 years ago on July 2nd. We were one of 3 pilot sites in Vermont to try out this program of putting recovery coaches in the emergency department to connect with, to engage with patients who come in with a substance use disorder. And of course, the original impetus for that had to do with the opioid crisis. And so everything was the opioid crisis, but
and it still is.
It is, although we know, and we can say opioid crisis, but as we know, alcohol still remains by far the most significant substance of this problematic substance that takes people to the emergency department. But nevertheless, we, along with Burlington and Bennington, we were one of 3 who piloted that program, and the early results look so promising that within a year they rolled it out to the rest of the state. And so every recovery center now is paired with at least one hospital in the state. Every hospital in the state has a recovery coach that's available to them, and sometimes more. We have a team in order to engage with people who come in. Now, it's evolved really from that initial emphasis on opioids to all substances, and we not only meet people in the emergency department. By the way, we're there 24/7. We get to the ED within 30 minutes, 24/7. So somebody's always on call or on staff there. But we also engage people in the med-surg floor, and we also run a group there, a smart recovery group, on the 3rd floor, which is the psychiatric floor. Because a lot of people have co-occurring disorders. They have a combination of substance use disorders and mental health challenges. And people we know end up there. So
right, that's the common denominator.
Yeah,
really.
so we have somebody who goes in once a week to do a smart recovery meeting, and that's helpful too, because that's another way they can connect with us. But the program has proven to be an amazing game changer, so to speak, of stigma in healthcare settings. The longtime president of the National Institute on Drug Abuse, Nora Volkov, has long written about and crusaded for the healthcare system to address their problem with stigma. And it's a serious problem that's actually, it can be a deadly problem for the person with the substance use disorder who internalizes it and therefore won't go to seek health care because they don't want to be treated that way. And she gives the example of this man she encountered in Puerto Rico who had a serious abscess on his leg and in danger of losing his leg, but he wouldn't go to the hospital because he didn't want to be treated that way. And it's pretty devastating. So in the course of our work there, We don't preach, we don't teach, but we just show by example by working with the medical staff, the doctors and nurses and techs. Our coaches are teaching them just by how they work together that people can recover from substance use. They can be healthy, functioning, responsible professionals in the community. They learn that simply by working together, and so their attitudes change. So they go from seeing and it's understandable, people go to the ED and they're at their absolute worst.
Right.
And so they get inured to it, and they stop treating them like other patients. They're less than. And keep your distance because you can't afford to allow yourself to care about them because they're just going to be back again in another month or two. But what they're learning is that they're just people. They're like everybody else.
Right.
And so they treat them better. In fact, Dr. Mesh Curry has said more than once that the recovery coaches are the glue that holds together their entire response to substance use disorder, and that in many ways the recovery coaches teach the medical staff how to behave with people with substance use disorders.
Do you feel that some people don't seek treatment in a medical facility simply because they're worried about law enforcement and the repercussions of if I call for help, I'm going to be in big trouble, or when I get to the hospital and I'm asking for help or I've overdosed, that law enforcement's going to be involved, and I don't want to deal with that aspect of it?
There may be some of that with some people, but I don't think that's a major factor. I think there are people who have had negative experiences at the hospital in the past, but we have encountered many people who were relieved to find they were treated differently this time, and who were grateful to have a team that involves both medical professionals and someone with lived experience taking care of them. The thing is that they don't go to the hospital, to the emergency department, to be in recovery. They're there because of some crisis, something happened.
Right, and they need help right away.
They need help right away, and it isn't. They don't see it as having to do with substance. They see like a broken leg from falling off a ladder because they were drunk fixing the roof, or something like that. So they're there they want in and out as quickly as possible. But our coaches have become really good at simply engaging with the person, getting into a conversation, meeting them where they're at, not trying to force them to see what their issue is with substances, but just asking questions and getting contact information to follow up after they're released.
And then we know that the Turning Point Center is, you not only provide services, but you are the resource center basically for services throughout this area. You can direct people where they should go or could go. They can get a recovery coach of their own through your service. Yeah, so that's one of the job requirements of a recovery coach is to learn what the resources are in our community, and we keep a vast record of what's available for whatever issue might come up. And our role is to connect them with resources, but not to do it for them. So we will help them. We will be there with them, but they will do it. And so we give them the phone number. We'll sit there while they make the call. And whether it's dealing with childcare or going back to school or needing to get a primary care physician, whatever the need might be, we know where to point them to get that kind of help, or maybe treatment, because people will often come to Turning Point not even realizing at that point that they ought to go to treatment. But after talking to a coach for a while, they think, have you thought of giving a call to CVSAS, Center for Substance Use Services, or Treatment Associates, or the regional hub for medication-assisted treatment, or for other needs. And of course, we try to sponsor as many kinds of programs as we can. Now we're in the middle of things now. Our old facility is just really not in good shape, and we can't do a whole lot there. We have 10 employees now, and we don't have rooms for people to meet in. We have a big meeting room. We basically have 3 big rooms, and so. But nothing private, really.
It's not private, really. We make do, and we can make privacy when we have to. And so you might have 2 people in a big meeting room, but we're making it work. But we're in the midst of developing a project to create a new recovery center on the south end of town, in a building that we hope to restore, a historic building, to restore the building and put an addition on and make it into a model recovery center.
And I hope that you can do that.
we're hoping. We've raised a fair amount of money for it. We need a little bit more, but we're hoping we can break ground by the end of this year on it.
That would be amazing,
Yeah.
because we do need more services
Yeah.
here locally. It sounds like there are a lot of things, but there really isn't. There is, but there isn't. We need. We could actually, in my opinion, use more residential, especially when it comes to men. And I'd love to get your view on the whole residential program, 14 days.
No, that's not treatment. That's glorified detox.
Right.
But they know that too. I mean, basically the cost of residential treatment is so high. It takes such a high part of the treatment budget that they can't keep up with it. And so you have a lot of people who are not really treated. They're just kind of semi-treated, and they're still wandering around, kind of wondering what to do next. But yeah, we need recovery residences, more recovery residences that can provide a drug-free and safe and supportive environment while they take the next steps to get their job and to get back on track, maybe reunite with their family. But over time, then reach a point where they've saved enough and where they're stable enough that they can go out and have their own place again. So we also support Good Samaritan Haven. They have 3 facilities now.
Yes.
And I mean, their leadership there is now doing a terrific job, because they see their job as not. I mean, Rick DeAngelis, their director now, it comes from an affordable housing background, so he knows how important housing is, and not just sheltering. And so he's trying to provide multiple settings where people can take that next step from a temporary shelter to an ongoing process of having their own home. And they have we have an MOU to support, a memorandum of understanding to support them in all 3 facilities. But they're focusing the facility they have on South Berry Road, the former Phoenix House building.
Yes.
Downstreet Housing and Community Development owns that building, so they're renting it from them. And Rick is focusing on a recovery-oriented environment at that facility, and we're looking forward to having groups there. We have a group at their visitor center facility on Barry Montpelier Road, and so we hope to keep expanding what we do with them. But of course, the key is to identify people who want to make some kind of change to become healthier. We'll work with anybody who wants to make some sort of change to be healthier. As long as they're committed to one thing, we'll work with them. And then when they've accomplished that, then we'll work on something else. And at a certain point, maybe they'll actually get into recovery.
And do you think that while they are spending their time in residential, that it is or it would be beneficial to have counseling and maybe courses on how to budget money, how just life skills in general? So because a lot of people that are suffering have never had that opportunity, or a lot of them have never done that before. They have literally just, I hate to put it this way, but it is how it is. They've been hustling like their entire adult life, and that's all that they know. So in order to make them successful, it just seems like it would be wise to implement that as part of the recovery process.
Well, in the past, we have held life skills groups at Turning Point, and they went very well. But you have to have partners who can work with you, and we've typically been the only one who was so underfunded that we could work with anybody.
Right.
But what people can do in programs is determined by their funding. That's what determines silos. But we're going to be doing it again. And one of the things that I've been talking with someone from the Community Justice Center here in Barrie who works with their housing program, that if you remember a few years ago, they had I forget the name of the group, but they sponsored a series of workshops in Barrie. It's called All In for Barrie.
Yes.
On different topics. And there was one on housing, and a lot of people came and they lamented the lack of housing, which is definitely true. I mean, it's a problem for everybody, but especially people who are having trouble getting back into housing. But at one point, there were several landlords there. At one point, one of them just spoke up and said, "Hey, listen, you got to teach these people how to be tenants."
Right.
You know, we try to work with them, but they don't know how to be a tenant. And, you know, there's truth to that. There's a lot of habilitation as opposed to rehabilitation that needs to take place with a lot of people, especially as you pointed out, you know, the younger they are when they start using substances, that's when their education starts to, you know, fall by the wayside, and they stop learning, and maybe their home life is not conducive to learning the basics about how you live and how you pay the rent and how you deal with a landlord and how you shop and everything else. Right. And so they have to learn those skills. And so this person and I think it'll end up in the new place. We'll be able to put on workshops, bring in landlords to meet with people who are needing to find housing, needing to learn how to be a tenant, so to speak. So I think that would be really helpful. But a lot of it, you're right, is skill-based. It's you don't know how to do something, and so you can't be successful.
Yeah, and it's hard if you don't know those things. It's very intimidating too. And I mean, I have to believe that it makes you, well, you regress a little bit, and you feel very intimidated in your self-worth, and it changes a whole lot about you trying to advance forward if you really don't know how, and you feel like that the only thing you have to offer is I suffer from substance abuse disorder or I suffer from mental health issues. And so to speak to a landlord about that and say, I've never had a landlord. I've always lived with my mom or my dad, my parents, my cousin. I've couch surfed, whatever. And I've never paid rent. I've never paid a light bill.
Never kept a bank account.
Right. I mean, let's face it. Yeah. You're probably not first on the list of, gee, let me help you. And so, with that being said, we spoke a little bit about Jenna's Promise when you first arrived because of our display of their wonderful coffee here. What would you say, or what are your thoughts about maybe having something similar to Jenna's Promise here in Barrie?
Well, Jenna's Promise is not a typical program. I mean, they have every locality has its pluses and minuses. What Jenna's Promise has going for it in Johnson is that the founders of Jenna's Promise, Greg and Don Tatro, happen to be well established in Johnson, very successful business as a contractor, and so Greg Tatro could handle all of the renovations to the buildings that they stood up to for residential buildings, but they also started a number of enterprises in the town there,
right, including
a appliance repair, and coffee, and they have a second. They have another second.
Promising goods store,
and so they're working on what is called something like an enterprise model, where the activities they engage in generate some revenues, and the people they hire to work in those programs are all people in recovery. So they can actually support helping a person gain their marketability as an employee while they're in their programs. And because Johnson's small, and they're really handling things well there, so they haven't created any friction in the community. And they have several recovery residences of different levels. There are 4 different levels recognized in the certification process for recovery residences, and I think they have at least 2 levels there.
Yes.
But so they have a model that works for them. I don't think the same model would necessarily work here. I don't think we have the flexibility to actually. We don't have the resources to sort of get into the kinds of activities they've gotten into there. Life is a little more expensive in the city than it is out there.
We do have businesses, though, and many who are in search of employees. And so I have to, I just think that in a perfect world, we could get a bunch of those employees to join in as part of the mission to recover and allow these people to move forward. I know that that's a lot for an employer to take on.
But but they are taking it on in many cases. We're working with Working Fields, which refers to themselves as a second chance hire. And basically, it was founded by Mickey Wiles, who himself is a person in long-term recovery. He was at one point the executive director of the Burlington Turning Point. And he started a business to have contracts with employers to say, look, this here's a person who's had some problems in his background. He's had barriers to overcome. They've gotten to this point, and they're ready to move forward. They need a job, and if you're willing to hire them as a day worker with us, under contract with us, at a certain point, if you're happy with their work, you'll hire them as a permanent employee. So it's a kind of a day worker to permanent employee kind of program. But here's the important factor is that as part of their service, they will provide a recovery coach for this person to support them while they're getting into the workplace and to be there as they go through different issues and problems and to be a support for them to remain in recovery while they're getting acclimated in the workplace. And it's working very well. And in fact, we have the regional agent for that company works out of Turning Point here mostly.
Right. Is it Dorkin?
It's Lorcan.
Lorcan.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Lorcan is terrific. And they now have a contract with Central Vermont Medical Center where CVMC hires people from working fields that are working fields clients to work there. And the model originally called for them to hire and train recovery coaches. But since then, first Springfield, and then we have worked out an arrangement for him to use our recovery coaches so that people could be then connected completely into the area resources that we have. So any person who gets employment through working fields here in Barrie gets a recovery coach from us to work with them while they're getting into their employment. And they help them in the other aspects of support that they need. So they become regular, clients of ours as well as with working fields. And so it's similar, except that it's we're not affiliated with the employers. Now that's the hospital is one example, but there are a number of others of employers. There's some good employers in this area, including one that had hired Tyler and really liked Tyler and wanted to keep him as an employee, but he was suffering. He had an issue.
Right.
So the owner of the company called me and said, "Can you do something about this? I want to keep this kid.
Right. I really like him.
I like him. He's got a real future here. But there are some things that aren't working out because of his substance issue. And so, it was an effort that tried but didn't work. And
right.
But
which is definitely the case. Sometimes it certainly doesn't happen overnight and the first try. Sometimes it takes many tries. And I think that's the hardest part for a lot of people. If you're a business owner, you have a business to run. And so it's super frustrating, I'm sure, to hire someone, invest your time and your money and resources into training that person only to have them not work out and to maybe keep that turnover. But it's so important. I mean, my son too, he got a job through working fields and his substance use is what it dissolved that relationship, and they too wanted to hire him, and I believe that they did. He ended up being hired as an employee, and it didn't work because he couldn't keep it under control. Money is an evil sometimes.
Well, I think that, but overall, the employer's experience is positive enough that they hang in there with it. We got a lot of people in this town, in this area, who care about people and
I believe
who want to help
yes.
and who understand that if you can get one person with a substance use disorder on the road to recovery, you're saving your community all kinds of heartache and resources as well, and you're making your community healthier. And I think more and more employers are beginning to see that. And what they need is the proper kind of support so they know how to make informed decisions.
Right. And sometimes support is literally accountability, to sit in front of them and say, I know that this is a problem. And that's why I named my show this. It's no secret. We're all aware. So let's talk about this.
Yeah.
Let's pick it apart and figure out how we're going to make this work. And that I think that accountability is the biggest piece of the puzzle, because I think
it's a big piece.
Yeah, I mean they really want to. I think that most people that are suffering, they want to be well. They don't like how things are for them, and they want to be well.
Yeah, up to a certain point, they don't know what the problem is. And the disease, the way it works in the brain is that it really fosters denial. Denial in a clinical sense of the person being oblivious to the consequences of their behavior. And it takes some sort of encounter with reality that stops them in their tracks, and it could be anything, to say, wait a minute, this isn't right. I don't necessarily, they might not know what the problem is. They're likely not going to say that the substance is the problem, because the substance is still working for
right,
them.
and it makes them feel better about the problem.
So, at that point, at a certain point, of course, the substances don't work anymore. So, so it's possible, and our work is based in the understanding that anybody who's self-aware enough to see that they have something going on that isn't right, we can work with them, because we can ask questions, and at a certain point, they themselves will get out of their own heads sort of a discordant understanding of where things are with them, and where things don't add up, and where they have to start thinking about, well, what kind of choice should I make here? And this motivational interviewing is the skill that does that, and that's something that every recovery coach is trained in. Of course, the basic training is not enough. We keep going back for advanced trainings. It's an evidence-based practice. It's been around since the 70s, and it evolved primarily from a treatment side. But it's a very effective way for leading people to change, to make a decision to change, whatever it is to change. Maybe it's smoking, or maybe it's other substances. Whatever it is, a person skilled in motivational interviewing can get the other person to come to see what's going on, and to bring themselves to a point where they know they have to make some sort of choice, and then support them when they make a good choice. But so we're there all the time, and in the beginning they don't necessarily know that substance is the problem. Okay, so that's not what you think. So let's talk about what you think is the problem. One of the jokes is that the guy comes in with his first DUI, and it's like, oh, that was just bullshit. That was just an accident. That just shouldn't have happened.
Right.
But
I only had 2 beers at dinner.
Right.
Right.
So then you get the second DUI, and said, I think that cop might have been lying in wait for me because he remembers. The third time, it's I don't know what it is, but they just keep they just keep coming after me. Then the fourth DUI is, every time I got a DUI, I had been drinking and driving. Maybe the drinking has something to do with it.
Right. I may have a problem.
Yeah.
Right.
So it can be a real process of peeling the layers of the onion back.
Which can be frustrating to members of the community when you see somebody try and try and try and try, and it's hard for someone who's not struggling to understand
That's right.
why this continues to happen.
Why can't you leave that beer sitting on a counter, or that drink sitting on a counter, and walk away from it? Because when you take a drink, maybe it's kind of pleasing, but when I take a drink, my whole world changes. And it's, where have you been all my life? It's a whole different reaction. But it is the way that substances work in the brain is it makes it really hard to see the way to make good choices. It affects your power of making good choices. And so it's not that it forces you into anything, it's just that you convince yourself through that part of your brain. And that's one of and so even when you start to maybe get into recovery, then your motivation slips a little bit, and the old thinking slips in, and there you go.
And sometimes it's not even about motivation. It could be tragedy, or you had a really bad day at work, or you got hurt, or there's all kinds of different things that can make you slip a little bit backwards if you never learn to deal with it.
But the motivation is always a key part. Because if you're motivated to want to stay sober, you become self-aware enough that when you start to feel yourself going down a bad path in your mind, you stop and you call somebody that you can talk to about it. Or you find yourself a recovery meeting or something. So motivation is huge in it. And that's what our job is, to help a person gain and regain their motivation to stay on a path of recovery.
Which is what Mariah has done.
That's what she's doing every day. Yeah.
Exactly. I mean, she had to definitely make a conscious choice to be okay, even when her whole world just fell apart. And I have so much respect and admiration for
It's
her
funny
for that.
though, people with substance use disorders, and I am too. I'm in long-term recovery from a substance use disorder. Find that it's the tough things are the easiest to remain sober through at a certain point. It's the little things that you don't deal with from day to day, and they build up, and your thinking slowly changes, and then one day you find yourself, I really deserve a drink today. You know,
Right.
and part of that is if you're not in contact with other people in recovery. This is one of the reasons why being part of a recovery community, whatever that is for you, can be so important, because other people are going to recognize when your thinking is starting to change, or when you're not sounding like yourself, or when you don't look or sound good, and can kind of call you up a little bit and say, hey, what's going on right now?
Right. Accountability. They're going to
Well,
make you be honest with yourself.
Well, it's not even just honesty, it's just recognizing what's going on, because the person doesn't see that happening. So it's, but the experts call addiction a relapsing disease of the brain, and that's for a reason, because almost nobody gets into recovery and just stays there for the rest of their lives. It's fits and starts. It's start here, and then you stumble, and I don't like the word relapse because it kind of has a moralistic tone to it.
Right.
Return to use, I would
True.
call it, and it happens, and we expect it. We don't openly expect it with people, but when it happens, okay, well, come back. So when somebody has a return to use and they come back in, my first thing I say to them is, way to go for coming back.
Right. Right.
You did the one thing that was the most important thing of all, which is to come back. And
Reach
deal
out.
with it. And deal with it. To get rid of the moralistic thing, the shame, that I did something wrong, by returning to use. Well, if a diabetic, has a reaction, and goes into an insulin coma or something,
Right.
we don't consider that to be a moral failing.
Right.
They need medical help.
Right.
Yeah.
And you get it for them.
And you get it for them. Yeah. And then you don't lecture them when they leave, right? So
about their choices.
Yeah. So but it's a similar kind of thing, with substances, and it's an effective stigma. We have this moralistic attitude that attaches to it, and so it's hard to see. Just this is a chronic disease, and it's not an effort to. You mentioned accountability, which is an absolutely key aspect to to recovery, but we're not trying to absolve anybody from responsibility for what they do.
Right.
Because even though you made bad choices, and those choices flowed from your disease thinking, nevertheless, you're still accountable and responsible for everything you do, and you will never have agency. This is my belief now. I'm not talking. This is not scientific. This is just me talking.
Yep.
I believe that until you take responsibility for everything you do, you don't have agency in your own life. You don't have proper self-respect because you haven't been the person you need to be, and for yourself. And so I always look for signs when somebody goes from blaming everybody else for their problem to realizing, it's me. And even when they have a conflict with another person, where there's two sides to it, there's two sides to this, and they have their side, but I have mine, and I need to deal with my side.
Right. It's not all about them.
Yeah,
It's not all about the police officer that keeps arresting you for
exactly.
DUI.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's, but it's really a joy when somebody does come to terms with that and begins to think about, gee, I've not really done so well by some members of my family. I think maybe I'm going to need at some point. I'm going to need to go back to them and come to terms with that. And that's always a joy to see somebody get to a place in recovery where they find themselves.
Right. They find peace with.
They find themselves. They regain their connections to other people, which is so huge. And especially for people with addictions, they need to be connected to other people, and regaining and forming those relationships is such a key to a person's sense of well-being.
And learning how to connect with the right people and leave your
Yeah.
old groups behind. And that's, I've said it, I think, every time I've done this so far, it can be a super lonely world for them. And even it's a super lonely world for me as a parent. Sometimes I've spent a lot of nights at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning wondering where my son is, thinking that I was the only one thinking that. But now I know
Yeah.
there are parents all over the
Yeah.
place that are doing the same exact thing as
And I told
am.
you we have a group that we're forming
Yes.
for parents of adults, kids who are struggling. And it's, it's there's some old language out there about enabling and so forth. This, for the most part, is just bullshit. But you need to keep loving your son or daughter, and so, but you need to learn how you can be effective with them. And when you need to be firm with them, it's nice to have support from other people who have been there.
Very
done
much
that.
so.
You know?
I belong to a couple of online groups, and that has definitely helped me. But I think that's amazing. I will probably come
Well,
and
you do.
attend those
You come,
because
you give me a call and I'll connect you with Mark, the facilitator. But when you mentioned being alone, that's what the disease does. It makes you
Isolates.
become more and more isolated and alone because that's where it flourishes. And the last thing your disease wants is for you to connect with other people,
right,
because that's those connections that,
or the right people
yeah,
anyway.
the right people,
Right.
yeah. But it's those social connections, and this is why it's important to me that we have a nice facility that people want to come to play, to talk, to work, to engage in all the sometimes the painful and hard things they have to do in recovery, but also the fun and the joy, and see it as a community, as a place to be part of a community that transcends individual recovery groups. It's not just NA or AA or SMART or whatever. It's everybody who are part of a common community and know each other and support each other. I mean, I think that's the one thing I want most out of this new facility, is to create that kind of environment and to offer activities and that people that enrich people's lives, and that not everybody who comes to them are going to be people in recovery. We want all kinds of people to come to the center. But there's one thing I wanted to mention. You mentioned yourself with your son. I have had so many moms call, and they're anguishing over a child who's struggling. And at a certain point, I'll say, "Are you getting help for you?" And there'll be silence. And in a few cases, they just break down crying because nobody has ever asked them, are they getting the help they need?
Right.
It's always focused on the person with the disease. But everybody who's in a family with somebody who's suffering needs help too.
Absolutely. It's tough. It's hard.
It is.
And I originally sought help of a local drug and alcohol counselor. And in my mind, I was doing it so that I could understand my son's side of things. Like, I wanted to understand what was happening. And in the end, I gained so much more from it than that. And I was enabling, maybe not in the sense that some people do, but I definitely fell for a lot of things. I need $20, and I'm broke down and I have no gas, or I have no food, or I'm with this person and they won't let me go unless you give me money. I have fallen for all of it, and I have fallen for it many, many, many times. And mostly I have fallen for it just because I just want him so badly to be okay. And I want to somehow save him. But now I know that I cannot. First of all, I cannot save him. There's not a damn thing I can do about it. And that's a really tough pill to swallow as a parent. Yeah. But I know that now. But the one thing that always sticks in my mind is that the counselor said to me, would you be able to live with yourself if you had to think about the fact that it was maybe your $20 that took his life? And it was literally numbing for me, because what if I gave him that money, and then then in turn didn't put gas in the car, buy food. He bought his, whatever he needed to get his fix, and didn't make
now,
it.
what you could do is to buy the food for him.
Right,
Or
exactly.
to go with him and fill his car, and that's not
Right.
enabling in a bad way.
Right, and now that's what I do now.
So I think you can be a mom and you can support your son in many ways, but you say money is the worst thing. I mean, and that's where something that directly feeds the addiction,
Which makes employment hard.
Yeah. But I'll tell you, you mentioned it being hard and learning from the counselor. We have recovery coaches who have kids who are struggling, and the one thing they learn pretty quickly is that they can't help them. The relationship gets in the way.
Right.
There's no way to get the mother-child relationship out of the way.
And I do still fall for it sometimes.
Yeah.
Not always.
But don't punish
Sometimes I
yourself,
stay
though.
really hard, fast, and know I'm not doing it. And other times I definitely still give in, and mostly out of fear. And I guess the other part of that I learned is I don't do it for him. I do it for me. I save him for me, not for him, really.
Well, but the first thing you have to do is save yourself. You have to stay healthy. You have to not let his problem take you down, and that can be hard sometimes. But it can be a kind of a real eye opener for a kid to be told, if I do this for you, it's harming me, and I'm not willing to do that.
Right.
I'll help you any way I can. That's going to help you, but I won't put myself at risk too. And at a certain point, they realize, hey, there is more than one person in the world after all.
Right, exactly. There's more than just me.
Yeah, there are limits. Yeah.
And it's super tough to get to a point, I think, where you're at those limits. It's kind of like when they're little and you say, if you do that again, I'm going to. If you do that again, I'm going to. Or if you do that, you're going to bed early. And the follow through is super, super difficult. At 2 years old and at 32 years old, the follow through is super difficult. Yeah. It's so I will definitely be looking forward to that and hoping that. So before we have to go, we still got a little bit of time. Let's talk about the new center and where you're at with that and what you still need and how the community can help you.
Well, first of all, we've gotten a lot of help from the community already, but we'll always accept more. But the Barre City has sponsored us for a community development grant, which we got for $300,000. And they've also allocated $40,000 of their opioid settlement funds to us because we actually worked to respond to the opioid crisis. And but the new building, there's a building on South Main Street, just past Tilden House. There's at the corner there's the post office on the right corner, and then on the left there's a church, the white church, and then there's the Ladder One Grill, then Tilden House, and right after that is this decrepit old white building.
Right, it was an antiques place. It was a salon. It's been everything.
It was built in 1845, and it's one of the remaining examples of a Greek Revival cottage style in Barre City. We hired a historical preservationist consultant to work with us on understanding the building, its origins, and how we could go about restoring it. And then we went about and got support from the state, historical preservation folks, who, after we came up with a design, came in and said, okay, well, you can do this, this, and this, but you can't do that. We need to repair the windows, but not replace them. So we agreed to what they told us we needed to do. But there's an L at the back of that building that they gave us permission to cut down, to tear that down, and in its place put up a full 2-story addition in the back that's actually going to be bigger than the main building, but it's in a similar style. And so we're going to have something better than 6,000 square feet. We'll have a number of different.
What do you have now? 1,000?
We have about 1,700 or something.
Yeah.
And it'll be all new stuff. And it's going to be, since we'll be going down to the studs anyway, we'll have every room wired for internet and intercoms and communications. And it's going to be a pleasing but not fancy environment. It'll be simple but nice. And
it'll obviously allow you private spaces.
oh yes, we'll have 3 recovery coaching rooms that are small rooms for 2 people for recovery coaching. We'll have a staff room. We'll have the main staff people have their own offices, and there'll be there's a social room where we'll have a pool table and card tables and stuff like that. A multimedia resource center. We'll have a wellness room on the second floor for Reiki, yoga, you name it, anything to do with health there. And a multi-purpose room, which can be used for a number of purposes, but one idea we have for it, the hospital has talked with us about possibly, they have a perinatal program for moms with about to be moms with opioid addiction, where they dose them at the hospital. And what we're hoping we can do with them, and they're interested in it, is to have them come to our new facility to do the dosing, and then while they're there, they can get peer support from recovery coaches. We have a number of moms who have been in recovery while having little kids, so they have a lot to offer there. And so that's one thing that we plan to do, but there'll be many others too. We have several group rooms, including a big meeting room that can handle any number of people, as well as a couple of smaller meeting rooms and a conference room. So we'll be able to maintain a number of programs at the same time. Of course, there'll be an elevator. It'll be totally handicapped accessible. The back door, I mean, you can enter the building without going up steps, so there doesn't need to be a ramp.
Yeah.
And so we'll have some parking, not as much as I like, but then maybe we'll be able to buy the place next door and add some parking. But for the time being,
it is for sale.
Yeah, it is. So I'm really excited about it. It's going to offer things. It's going to be a model for recovery centers in the state, and
well, we definitely need it here.
Yeah,
for sure.
And we'll make our space available to other community groups who might want to hold meetings there. Like the Down Street building at the Keith Avenue apartment building. They have their offices there, but they also have a community center there, a community room, which is up to organizations in the community to use for free. And there's a refrigerator in there, and there's wonderfully comfortable chairs and tables and so on. So we'd like to do something like that too, and have our facility available, because the more we can kind of mix in people who don't have substance use disorders with our people, the more we're attacking the whole stigma thing too.
Right. So. Exactly. The support of the community and the acknowledgement by the community and the education of the community is huge. And that's part of why I want to do this. Not only is it in Tyler's memory, but in his memory, and for all of the people that we've lost. Really, me personally, my son has lost a lot of friends, and some of them I was super close to. They were like my own kids. And so for me, is getting other people to understand and to help just kind of kill the stigma and have people understand and realize, if we can be somehow connected in a community about it, we could actually do a lot of good and sure, never stop the whole thing, but we can definitely make a big dent in the problem.
And I can just mention that we're part of what's called the Central Vermont Prevention Coalition, which is basically a collaboration of every organization in the county.
They'll be coming on the show soon.
Is Eva coming on?
Yes. And the doctor, is it Shah?
Javed?
Yeah,
Mashkuri?
Yes.
Oh, he's terrific. So you'll learn a lot from him. He was the medical director of the ED when we started our program, and he's just been our biggest advocate for a long time now. And but all of them have, and Dr. Mark Detman, who's had to retire, nevertheless was a huge advocate for us and for the coalition. And he, of course, was a former medical director of the ED. And the current medical director of the ED, Dr. Ben Smith, is also a big supporter of our program with them. And so it's, but the coalition, I've never been a part of anything like it in my life. And I've been in a lot of coalitions over the many years. But it's amazing how selfless people are. They're willing to we come together, and people there's no agendas. We collaborate, we work together, we try to improve treatment and recovery and prevention in Central Vermont. And whatever we can do to do that, we do. We're just finishing up a 3-year grant we got to enhance our collaboration and to improve how we work together, and to bring in new partners. And it's really, I do think that outside observers would agree that our coalition is really the strongest one in the state.
Which is
it's just remarkable.
Awesome news.
It's just really remarkable.
Yeah, we need it.
Yeah.
They are, so just like you just received last week or the week before, a couple of weeks ago maybe, the naloxone box.
Yeah.
So when they come, Eva will bring one for here at the
Terrific.
studio. So we'll have one here at the studio. Super important to me. And I wish that every store on Main Street had access or had that.
And I'd like to say there are two components to the box. There's naloxone, i.e. Narcan. There's also a breathing mask in there that you can use without having to put your mouth to a person's face. That is really important as we're dealing with xylazine, which is the latest drug scourge, another animal tranquilizer. Narcan doesn't work with xylazine.
Right.
And so you need some way to keep somebody alive until help can get there, and this breathing mask can do that. So it's a two-part equipment thing in the nalox box, and the Narcan we get from the state for free. The mask, the coalition has some masks which they'll supply as we need them until they run out, and then we'll have to get them for ourselves. But it's a really important part now that we have people starting to use xylazine more often.
Right. Now, can anybody come and get the Narcan from you? Can a parent or anybody in the community come and say, I would like to, keep this with me? Yeah.
Now, when we're open, just come in the front door and we'll give you Narcan. Or if you, the meetings that are held at Turning Point are held when we're not open. And so the nalox box is really effective for the times we're not open, but there's a meeting going on.
Right.
So, but the meetings are mostly in the morning, so from 7:30 to 8:30. But we have like 4 morning meetings, and then we have 2 late afternoon, early evening meetings. We have the NA group meets at 6 o'clock on Thursdays, and the Al-Anon meeting takes place on Saturdays in the afternoon, late afternoon. So anybody can come in, and those are all. There's only one meeting that isn't an open meeting, and all the closed meeting means is that there is somebody who wants to stop drinking.
Right.
You don't have to be abstinent. So the nalox box is in the meeting room where it's available and accessible to anybody who comes by during a meeting.
Yeah. And Central Vermont Prevention Coalition is chiming in, and they said, just remember that it's not just people who use drugs who can overdose. The wrong medications or someone who takes too much of their own medication can also overdose. A naloxone box helps so many people.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
is that Eva?
Probably. Yeah. That's my guess, is it's Eva.
Well, if Eva's going to be on, too, along with Java, they're just both great people.
Yeah, I'm super excited to have them. Eva has been in before on Aired Out with Dr. Detman. We had them, same as you, quite some time ago now. It's been a couple of years at least. I actually think the grant had just occurred. They had just gotten the grant and started the program at the hospital, and that's
by the way, Dr. Detman was the driving force in getting that grant.
Right. Right.
We got a 1-year planning grant, which then led to the development of a strategic plan for the implementation grant, which we then applied for and got. So it's been 4 years, really. And Dr. Detman was the key driving force in
which
all
is
that.
Incredible.
Yeah.
And hopefully it stays here for years and years and years to come.
We're now that we've done this one project together, we're now beginning to come together to put together grant applications for other projects, like to work with youth, for example. So we have one there in mind for the next time. We hope it comes around again. Availability, we couldn't get it in this last time, but it would provide all of us with the resources to support young people, teens and young adults. So I'm looking forward to that too.
Yeah, it's awesome. So I want to thank you so much for coming in. I know that Hillary's going to be also joining me sometime real soon.
Good.
From the Turning Point Center. Maybe at some point, Mariah.
Yeah.
We've talked about that as well. Some really good guests. And next week, I actually, we won't be here on Tuesday because of the holiday. So on the 8th, on Saturday, we're going to do a show on Saturday instead at noon with somebody that's in recovery. His name is Barry Wagle, and he's a local guy who has started on his path to recovery. And he reached out and said, I'd really like to share my story, which I think is an amazing thing because each of those stories gives somebody else hope.
Mm-hmm.
And
Terrific.
I mean, it's a big deal. So if you have a story that you want to share, by all means, reach out and schedule a time to come on down. And we don't have to necessarily do a show. I'm willing to sit and chat and tell everybody, what I've been through, what my experiences are, help in any way I can. And that's just the way it always will be. So, yeah.
Well, I think it's great that you're doing this, and I hope people hear it and maybe get something out of it.
Yeah, we definitely have a pretty good following already. Good. So I'm super proud of that, especially Tuesday afternoon at noon. Who would think? But of course, it stays right here on Facebook and YouTube, and people can watch it anytime that they're available. They don't necessarily have to watch live. And we try to keep up with the comments, just so you know. Try to keep up with the comments. Make sure if there are questions, concerns, or you want to know something more about what was said, that those comments get answered.
And anybody can call us anytime with any questions they might have.
And just go ahead and give your number.
Okay, it's 802-479-7373.
And I will get that link up so that everybody has it, a link to your website that gives all of the numbers, your Facebook page, and then I'll post the number as well.
Our website is under construction, but there is some information there.
Yes, there is some. I checked before I got here this morning just to see
we're in the
what was
process
there.
of redoing that whole thing, and there's going to be a lot more to it soon, especially and before we move to the new place.
Nice.
I was talking to somebody from the Community Foundation about the project, and I mentioned that the first person I want to hire is an activities director. And
Good
the
idea.
And the guy's eyes lit up and said, "Why don't you apply to us for a grant for that?" So we will. We'll apply for a grant, and we'll have an activities director who can get all kinds of neat stuff going on down there.
Yeah, why not? And it'll keep people wanting to come in.
Yeah, that's right.
Right? And
That's
the
right.
more they want to come in, the more help they can get.
Whether they want it or not, if they come in for something they like, stick around. Maybe you'll learn something too.
Right. Learn something new.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot for joining us. And please don't forget to like, follow, share. And if you'd like to be a guest, as I said, or if you know somebody else that may want to come on, please reach out. And then until next Saturday this time. Until then, be well, be safe, and know, most importantly, that you're not alone.